could get very heated, but that's kind of my point. And to-go coffee. Hey travel lovers, welcome to A Wanderlust for Life. I'm Jessica, and in this video, I'm gonna be talking about the everyday differences between the US and the Netherlands. I have lived here in Amsterdam since 2014, so my specific perspective is from Virginia, where I was born and raised until I was about 28, and then I moved here, and I live in Amsterdam, so that's the perspective I can give here. Now, obviously, you guys love to leave me comments like Amsterdam does not represent the Netherlands, and I absolutely, wholeheartedly agree. But this is what I can tell you, because this is where I live, this is where I've been. So the US is obviously a very big country with many cultures. The Netherlands is also, it's a smaller country, but also very, very different cultures from the east to the west, the north, to the south, to the cities, to the countryside. You know what I'm talking about. So let's just dive in, shall we? Because I feel like the obvious thing to talk about is the Dutch directness. Now, I come from a southern state, and it is very common to try to be non-confrontational, walk on eggshells, try to figure out the perfect way to tell something to somebody so that they don't get upset. Whereas in the Netherlands, you just say what you need to say, and it's fine. I was thinking about it as non-confrontational versus confrontational, but I don't even consider it confrontational here. You just do what you need to do. It's very refreshing, and it saves a lot of like emotional and mental energy that you really just don't have to deal with here. Hey, how you doing? Hi, how are you? These are questions that Americans love to ask, but do they actually want to know how you're doing? Sometimes I take it as they do, mainly because I might just want to talk about myself, but in reality, the Dutch don't do that. If you ask them how they are, they think you want to know how they are. And here, it's more of a good morning, good afternoon. I mean, they do say hoe gaat het, which is how are you doing? But if they ask it, they mean it. You know what I mean? So they want to know how you're doing. But if you walk into a shop, they're not gonna say, hello, how are you? Even in Dutch, because, you know, they don't know you. And if you're hearing weird sounds, there is renovation happening across the street. So I am sorry, but I tried to film this while it's mostly quiet. But I live in a house from 1930. If you haven't seen the video of the tour of my house, I'll leave that down below in case you're super curious. But that also means that there's usually somebody renovating around me. The 3 kisses. Now, I want to hear from you. If you are Dutch and watching this video, and I know y'all love to see if I'm right or wrong, let me know down below if you're still doing the Dutch 3 kisses, because I know at the beginning of the pandemic, everybody was saying, oh, I'm so glad we're not doing that anymore. It's silly, and it's not going to last through the pandemic. So I really want to know from you if you're still doing it, and if you feel obligated to, or if you want to. So yeah, the Dutch do the 3 kisses. Americans tend to hug. I don't know. I think it's nice, but maybe that's just because I'm American, and I see that 3 kisses or 2 kisses or even one side kiss is very European. But I have to admit, I feel like even just before I left, people started doing a one side kiss, and it feels very like exotic. So I don't know. That's just my perception. I'd love to hear if you have one about the 3 kisses versus hugging versus one kiss. Yeah, I'm curious. Another obvious difference is bikes versus cars. Now, obviously we have cars in the Netherlands, obviously, but bikes have more of a precedent. So that means that we have dedicated bike paths. You are not relegated to the side where the curb comes out about a foot and then you're kind of cycling the gravel. You know what I'm talking about, and that is a horrible way to cycle. I don't know how people survive it. I literally don't. I lived in a town where it was like the bike capital of Virginia. We didn't have bike paths, we had bike lines, and drivers hated us, so it was ridiculous. But here we have bike highways, we have bike paths through neighborhoods to keep people safe. We have in the countryside, I mean, it's so easy to get around on a bike. And not only that, we use a bike for a lot more things. You can carry your kids on a bike, on a bakfiets normally, but also you can put one in front of you, one behind you. It's very, very normal. We don't need SUVs here for stuff like that. Literally, I've seen 4 kids on a bike, and that is totally, totally normal. And when I say a bike though, I feel like Americans have this idea of this one person, 2-wheel thing, but that's not always the case. There are different kinds of bikes for different purposes, and I think that's why they get used so much here, because there is so much variety. But like I said, we also have cars, but parking in Amsterdam isn't very easy and it's very expensive, and yeah. But as far as the entire country goes, the bikes are still very much a strong thing that you will see in the towns, and the cars are used more for like big shops or driving further distances, stuff like that. Grocery shopping, we have smaller grocery stores than they do in the US. And we even have big grocery stores, but they are still a quarter of the size of the ones in the US. It's kind of crazy to me when I go back. I get so overwhelmed by the cereal aisle or the chips aisle or the soda aisle. It just is insane. There's too many choices and the space is just too big. What we do is we have smaller refrigerators and freezers. So we can't do this massive grocery shop and stuff everything in there. So we do it multiple times a week, sometimes on a bike, sometimes by delivery, sometimes by car, depending on where you live. But you get fresher fruit and vegetables and stuff like that. And we create a lot of food here in the Netherlands. So not everything has to come from very far away, which is also very nice. Obviously we do import plenty, but it's just really nice to be able to have that option. And of course we have farmers markets. You do in the US too, obviously. But I don't know, I just really like that because you can just go to the market, pick up stuff, and that way you're not getting a bunch of packaging as well. But yeah, grocery shopping is a totally different experience here. You don't have to spend 3 hours in a grocery store. You go after work or whenever, and you just bring it on the way home. It's a lot easier. A big one for me, and one of the reasons we actually moved to the Netherlands, is the work-life balance. So, you know, this idea of overtime and working yourself to the bone, and the busier you are, the better it is, or the better you look, just is not a thing here. We have major corporations, we have small startups, we have everything in between, but the culture here is you do your work, but you have a life. Like, it's normal to have life things. I literally don't know how I did anything in the United States. And this idea of sick days, I saw a job posting the other day in the US for something, and it was like benefit 10 sick days. And I realized that is a big deal for a lot of people. I can't get over how angry that makes me now. You can't plan when you're sick. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And yes, I know culturally it is very different. There are plenty of people who will then use sick days as vacation days, but that's kind of the problem too, right? Like here, if you're sick, but you're not worked to the bone and you have a work-life balance, so you're not trying to call out sick when you're not sick. So it's a very, very different idea. It's a different culture. Obviously the vacation days is a big thing. Here you get like 21 at least vacation days, and depending on your job, a lot of times they'll give you at least 25 plus federal holidays. So yeah, the work-life balance thing is a very, very big deal. It's a very big difference from the US to here. Travel, you know I have to talk about travel. That is what I love to do. And if this is the first video you've ever seen from me, in addition to these videos about expat life, I travel a lot around Europe. So if you like those kinds of videos, go ahead and subscribe. You'll see a big red button down there where you can subscribe. And if you want to support the channel, I also have a Patreon, and you can also become a channel member. I do live streams every other month, so I'd love to have you join us for that. But let's just talk travel. It is easier, cheaper, faster to travel in Europe. And because there are so many countries close together, you can just get a lot more done. You can see a lot more. You can experience a lot more in a short amount of time, which I think is pretty fabulous. And if you can just take a small backpack, you normally don't even have to pay for bag fees, which is kind of amazing. Also, trains are a big deal here. It makes it so easy to get from point A to point B. I could do a whole video about trains. If you want something like that, let me know down below. But for a lot of trains, if you're planning this, book as early as you can, because then you will get the best prices. But let me know if you want more about the trains of Europe. Next, two things that are not the same: coffee shops and to-go coffee. Okay, bear with me. Coffee shops are for smoking, and for recreational use of, you know, green leaves, things like that. I'm not sure if I can say it on YouTube without getting demonetized, but it is not coffee. It is for recreational things. So we say cafes or coffee houses here. And if you go to a cafe or coffee house, you can get a coffee to enjoy there. To-go coffee, while you can find it, absolutely. It's a very international city, so they realize that a lot of people want to have coffee to go. But this culture is about enjoying your coffee, and like, you might be people watching, you might be catching up on your social media, you might be chatting with a friend or colleagues. Coffee is a huge thing in the Netherlands, like huge. Some Dutch people that I know drink 3 coffees a day, and a lot of it is social. When I used to work at booking.com, people would have like their 9 a.m. coffee, sometimes their 11 a.m. coffee, and then the right after lunch coffee. It was kind of a habit that instead of smoke breaks, they would have coffee breaks. And I don't drink coffee, but I would join them, and it was a social thing, and it's a, yeah, it's a collaboration thing as well. So enjoy your coffee, don't take it to go. Make sure you make time for that if you do move here. Oh, one more thing about the coffee. You normally get a little cookie on the side. And I get very disappointed if the person I'm with gets a coffee and they want to eat their cookie, because then I want their cookie. So if you're ever with me and you order a coffee and you don't want your cookie, just slide it on over to me. Children are allowed to be on their own a lot younger. You will see kids quite young on their own bikes, cycling to school, to, you know, a sports thing, to their friend's house. It's very safe here, so for cycling and just general safety, so it's not a big deal. And I think that's really interesting, and it makes me feel good, to be completely honest, that a place is safe enough to where that's okay. And I mean, you'll see kids taking the metro by themselves, and I couldn't give you an age range because I'm so out of the loop on how old a kid looks. If you're Dutch, feel free to let me know down in the comments. But I love that. It's one of the things I love so much, because yeah, it just gives this sense of safety and security. I don't know about you guys, but I really feel that the Dutch are very practical and Americans are very emotional. Do you agree with me? And what I mean by that is more like societal rules and even laws. So, you know, in the US, a lot of things are done for emotions, their own opinions, their own religious beliefs and things like that. And they're forcing these kind of on other people. Whereas in the Netherlands, a lot of it is the practicality of things, and those are being forced on other people. So it's kind of what is best for the whole is best for the individual kind of a thing. And I do find them to be very different of how each culture really approaches societal rules, societal norms, and even laws. So that's just kind of my perception. Again, I'd love to hear what you think. This could get very heated, but that's kind of my point is you can take emotion or you can take the practical route, and it's rare, I feel like, that they kind of connect. And yeah, so that's my opinion on that. I'm very nervous saying that, but that is how I see it, and this is all about my opinion, so if you're not cool with that, probably shouldn't be watching this. Status, keeping up with the Joneses, and just not caring. I feel like in the US, there's a huge culture of keeping up with the Joneses, which if you don't know what that means, it's basically, you know, whatever your friend has or your neighbor has, you need to have that. You need to show that you are just as good, and Americans tend to do that in like physical things and showing of status, whether that's a Gucci bag, whether that's a Prada jacket. I'm just throwing names that I know out there. I'm not a big brand person. I never have been. I remember when I was in school, like elementary school, and I remember this so vividly. If you bought your shoes from Kmart, they were called Kmart kickers. And I remember begging my mom to buy me the Nikes because I didn't want to be called Kmart kickers or whatever. And That is so ridiculous. And I just don't see that kind of thing happening here. Now, I don't know if it happens with kids here, but with adults, it's less verbalized, but more like internalized. And people feel like they have to have this, or they have to be able to do this. They have to be able to spend this much money or whatever, or else it'll look bad and they won't look as good. Here, people try to be more normal and not actually brag. Even in job interviews, Sean found that to be the case. Like, you want to show what you can do, but you're not supposed to really brag. And it's the same here. Like, you can have a Van Moof bike, which is a very expensive, very nice bike, which I definitely want one just because they're super cool. Like the features, getting off topic. But I'm perfectly happy with my 500 euro, 8-year-old bike. It does the job. It gets me from point A to point B. And at no point in time do I feel like I am less than because I don't have an e-bike or I don't have a Van Moof. And that is true for a lot of things. People aren't trying to buy this or this or this. You just are who you are, and that is perfectly fine. There's really no social pressure to have fancy things or expensive things. Now, if you disagree, let me know. If you do disagree and you're Dutch, let me know in the comments the region that you're in, and if you're in like a city or outside of the main cities. I'd really like to know, but that's how I've always heard it. That's how I feel it, and that's how my friends have felt. Generally speaking, I feel a lot safer here. Of course, we have crime. We have some violent crime, but I feel safer here for a lot of reasons. There's the gun reason. There's not as many guns here. The police, there are a lot of them. They are usually in pairs. People's interaction with the police are very different than it is in the US. And like, just socially, things aren't as accepted. So for a lot of different reasons, I do feel safer here than in the US. And funny story, when a couple months before I was moving, my dad was like, is it safe? And it's crazy to me because if a murder happens here in Amsterdam, it makes big, big news. And a couple months prior, in the town I was living in, and he didn't live far from me, there was a murder in my town and he had no idea. And what's crazy about it is I didn't even know. A week later, I was doing a police ride-along. And if you want to know more about that, join Patreon and come to a live stream and ask me about it. But I did a ride-along and we had a call to the woman who had been murdered house because it had been broken into. I didn't know until we went there and somebody told me about the incident the previous week, because it didn't make big news. And even though that kind of thing in my town should have made big news, it just didn't, because like, it's almost just like it's expected. Violent crime is expected. And I think that's really, really sad. And I don't live in I didn't live in a very violent place, and I still don't. In general, I feel safer here in Amsterdam than I did in Virginia. And that's the reality of it. And of course, that's my personal opinion. Obviously, if you're visiting Amsterdam, you probably won't feel as safe as you do at home because it's unfamiliar, and I totally get that. But yeah, it's a pretty safe city. The last thing that I'm gonna talk about is tipping. Yes, tipping. Here, it's not super expected. It is always appreciated, and if you have good service, I highly encourage you to tip around 10% at least, or about 10% I think is the norm. In the US, you have to tip. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. 20-25% you have to tip, because that's their livelihood. Here, they actually make an income, but there they don't. So it's a huge difference, and I just feel like again, it's a social thing, and that's why I really enjoy it here, because you don't have this guilt that you are supporting somebody else with your tip, depending on how much you bought and all of that. So, I mean, you can argue that if you want to, but I do appreciate the fact that you tip here if you have good service. If you don't and you don't tip, you're not taking away their livelihood, but they know that you didn't give exceptional service, but they're also not going to get super upset about it. At least that's what I've heard. I've not worked in service here, but that is what I've heard. What do you think? Do you have anything to add? Was I wrong? Leave me a comment down below if you have anything to add. I'd love to hear it. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. Go ahead, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps me out. And subscribe if you want my videos like this, but also European travel videos. Bye!